I'll cue you when it's up. And we are live.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Washburn University YouTube channel for a very important conversation entitled Black Lives Matter, a Washburn University student forum on police brutality and structural racism. My name is Danielle Dempsey-Swopes. I am the Director of University Diversity and Inclusion at Washburn University. I'll introduce our moderator and members of our student panel in just a moment. But first, it's my role to set some context for our discussion this morning. We hope that this will be first of many campus and community discussions on this topic. The goal for this program is to hear from our Washburn University students and gain some greater perspective as to how they're faring and how we can support our students and begin to forge a strategy ahead for addressing racism in our community. Again, to give some context, we are having this discussion because the entire world witnessed the death of an African-American man, George Floyd, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, while in the custody of Minneapolis police. Mr. Floyd was under suspicion of passing a forged $20 bill. We watched in horror as Mr. Floyd was held down for 8 minutes and 46 seconds by 3 Minneapolis police officers, one with his knee pressed into Mr. Floyd's neck. Mr. Floyd pleaded with the officers no less than 18 times, imploring to them that he could not breathe. He called for his mother, and they did not relent. The officers ignored his pleas. They pressed him into the ground until he became unconscious, and they continued press into Mr. Floyd's body. Earlier this year, we learned of the death of Breonna Taylor, an African-American woman who was shot by police while sleeping in her own bed. The police entered her home without announcement. Her boyfriend thought burglars were entering the home. He shot at the police officers, who shot 22 times into her home, killing her. We saw the video of a young man by the name of Ahmaud Arbery, who was jogging. He was followed, he was shot and killed by an off-duty sheriff near his home in Glenn County, Georgia. And then last week, we learned of Christian Cooper, a bird watcher in New York Central Park, who encountered a woman by the name Can you all hear me?
No, we can.
My laptop lost connection for just 1 second. I'm sorry about that. These are but a few of the people who have been killed by police. We are calling out the names of Jamar Clark, Cassandra, Armando Philando Castile, Botham Jean, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Exel Ford, Michelle Shirley, Rogel Jones, Kenny Watkins, Sean Reed, Stephen Clark, Tamir Rice, and Aaron Garner, who also told police, "I cannot breathe," before he lost consciousness in a police chokehold on a New York City street. and there are many others that I've not named. As for today, our Washburn students are going to speak to you about their experiences. Our students of color on the Washburn University campus are not immune to the effects of police brutality or structural violence. And while we like to think of the university campus as a protective bubble of some kind, our students are traumatized by the violence that they see, and as well as the microaggressions that they experience on our campus from time to time. So we will turn to our students, we'll check in with them. We're going to make space for them to hear how they're doing, what they're feeling, and what they are feeling we need to move forward. The students on today's panel are, just give a wave when I call your name, Miss Victoria Smith. She is the WSGA Student Body President. Tranise Marshall, she's a member of the Black Student Union. Joanna Marks, also a member of the Black Student Union. Tomi Francis-Ramirez, Hispanic American Leadership Organization and Sigma Lambda Gamma. Brandon Moreno, WSGA Director of Diversity. PJ Carter, Washburn University student and member of Black Lives Matter. Savannah Rodriguez, We Are First. It's the first generation student leadership organization. Cassandra Rosso Bravo, a member of Gamma Phi Omega, and Mika Ross, our student at the Washburn University School of Law. Our moderator this morning is Mr. Eugene Williams. He's the general manager of KTWU, our local public television station. Mr. Williams will review a few ground rules for this program and start the dialogue with our students. We hope to have time to respond to your comments and questions at the end of this program. Turning it over to you, Mr. Williams. How are you feeling right now? How do you begin to make sense of the anguish so many are feeling right now?
Thank you, Danielle, for the introduction. And I want to thank all of you for participating today. In order to answer your question, Danielle, I think like most people, Black or white in America, there's a feeling of disappointment in our culture, in our society. I think there's also a feeling of disgust, in our society, and some elements of dismay in the way that we do things and the way that we operate in this world. As a Black man in America, I find myself, I kind of constantly live in amazement, but I'm never surprised at the things that white America will do to Black Americans. So with that, let me just get us going here. Once again, hello, I'm Eugene Williams, General Manager for KTWU, your local public television station here in Topeka. I'll be your moderator for today's event. This event is scheduled for 2 hours. We will not go beyond that time period, but we may opt to end early if you feel that you have exhausted your comments and questions. For everyone participating, you should really feel and believe that this is a safe space for you to be open, to be honest and expressive. However, we do expect there to be civil discourse. There are certain things that we just will not be able to tolerate during this event. No name calling, no excessive foul language, okay? No threats of physical violence or psychological harm. No racist epithets, and as much as possible, no overly aggressive tones of behavior, okay? So we expect participants to be civil, cordial, and in control throughout this whole Zoom experience. Please keep your comments and your questions as concise as possible so as not to monopolize the discussion and to give others plenty of time to participate. You'll probably want to monitor your microphones there to make sure that you have them open as I call on you for various things. And at some instances, you may just want to leave your microphone open because you know that we'll be coming back to you, or you may have an additional comment or something to offer. Our panel has already been introduced, and so we'll just kind of go ahead and get started here. If you would, If you'll state your first name, sometimes if you are not being seen on the screen here, just so we'll know who it is that's speaking and everything. So we'll start with Victoria. Okay, Victoria, you are with the Student Government Association. Let's talk about how you're feeling today and some of your responses to the things that you've been dealing with over the last 9 or 10 days or so.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you for having me. I just want to start off by saying how I'm feeling. As a lot of us are, I'm kind of, like you said, disgusted and disappointed. It's taken me a long time to kind of gather my thoughts on a lot of things. It took me a couple of days to release my statement to the students because, what I wanted to say was how angry I was and how disappointed and disgusted, like I just said, I was with everything going on. But in this time I really am trying to unify our students to get our students to understand that we're here for them, we're listening, like I'm here to serve the students. And so it's been difficult watching my friends who don't support the Black Lives Matter. It's been difficult to watch my friends be silent, and it's been very difficult to have to witness the racism that has just exploded out of this misery that we're going through right now. It's sad, and it's so difficult to put your thoughts together when you go through this kind of thing. So I'm kind of currently working on trying to figure out how the student government can help as much as we can, whether it's donating, whether it's having more town halls. But I'm trying to see what the students want from us too, because I can't hear every student unless they come to talk to me, but I'm trying my best. But yeah, that's basically how I'm feeling. It's been really mentally exhausting.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. PJ, I want to come to you next. Yeah, Victoria said some pretty interesting things there. She mentioned anger as an emotion. She talked a little bit about I'll use my term, being disappointed that some of her fellow students, friends, and folks don't support the Black Lives Matter concept and idea. As a matter of fact, I was looking at the news, I think it was either last night or early this morning, and there was a young kid who was trying to put up some stuff in a park, and a guy was really upset and start kind of running the bike towards her and everything, saying, hey, you can't do that here, and that type of thing. So tell me, man, is anger an appropriate emotion to have in a situation like this? Not necessarily the way you express it, but is it an appropriate emotion to have in situations like this? And your thoughts about people not supporting the Black Lives Matter concept.
Definitely yes. It's okay to be angry. That is a
Mhm.
proper emotion to feel, and we support it, and we will not silence that. We don't tell people what they can and can't say. I mean, our platform is to amplify the voices that aren't being heard. So none of that would be silenced, none of that would be shut down, and it would definitely be heard in any of the spaces that we create and give out. I mean, that's what we're here for. And your second part of that question was,
What about the concept of people not supporting Black Lives Matter? I mean, people have a right to support the things that they're interested in, the things that they feel are appropriate for them. Why does the whole concept of Black Lives Matter, just as terminology, seem to offend so many people in this country?
I don't know. It makes no sense. I mean, there's been different analogies put out there to help them understand what we mean when we say Black Lives Matter, and they don't get it. Black Lives Matter is not to say that any other life doesn't matter. It's a cry for help. Mm-hmm. It's like, do you not see what's going on in this country? Do you not see how we're being treated? Do you not see how we need help? The best analogy I seen was your neighbor's house is on fire, and you're watering your grass or power washing your house and saying all houses matter. It's like, damn it, my house is on fire. Like, help me.
Yeah. Yeah.
right
yeah.
there. You see it. Don't film it. Help
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, yeah, interesting concept. Let's go to Savannah. And Savannah, you're with the We Are First organization. And yesterday evening here on the Washburn campus, you guys held a, I won't call it a march, I'll call it a walk, you know, and on the campus and around the neighborhood and stuff. Talk about your reasoning for doing that and what you hope to accomplish with that.
So first of all, we wanted to take a positive approach to this whole protesting ordeal because people with the riots and stuff, people tend to look at protesting as a riot, and we wanted to take a positive standpoint on that. And our reasoning for doing so is we wanted to hear from the African-American students of color, because everybody thinks that when we say Black Lives Matter, that we are attacking them, and that's evidently not the case. We just want to make sure that everybody knows that we are here to help them and that we are here with resources if they do need help.
Yeah, you know, let's go down this road again, okay? We talked about it a little bit with PJ just a moment ago, but there seems to be a psychological barrier that exists when certain terms are being utilized in relationship to those things that they kind of matter to African Americans and other people of color in our nation. And when you use the term rioting, when you use the term protest, I mean, a lot of times those terms get to be ratcheted up when they're applied to things that we, and I'm using myself as a part of that, okay, that we might have an interest in. Why does that happen, Savannah? Can you explain that?
Well, I came from a really, really small town. There wasn't many people of color in it. And
Mhm.
whenever somebody said protesting or rioting, it was always something that attacked those people. It was never something that was looked at as a positive thing to do. It was never looked at as, oh, they're actually trying to change. It was always looked at as somebody was trying to attack you and you need to defend yourself. So I think that's part of the reason why it has such a negative standpoint.
Even the term protest.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I came from like my high school graduating class was about 35 people. And every time we heard the word protest, we knew it was something bad. We knew that they weren't trying to actually change, but they were just trying to do what they needed to do to get in the way so we couldn't defend ourselves. And I think that's a problem in our system because our high school history teacher taught us that protesting was wrong and that standing up for what you believe in, you need to be silenced unless it's the other side of the spectrum. Unless it's for gun rights, unless it's for reopening America, then if somebody else is protesting that Black Lives Matter, then they're attacking you personally. And I don't think that's the case.
Interesting. Brandon, I'm going to come to you next, sir. You're a part of the Student Government Association as well. Why don't you go and open your microphone there if you would, sir? I mean, we've used some terms here. We've talked about some things. Tell me about your thoughts, your feelings associated with this.
So, just in general, my feelings about everything going on?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Currently, I have a lot of emotions. I sometimes feel proud and motivated, and then sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough, and I just knock myself down. Because even though I want to think I'm an ally and I feel like I'm doing so much, at the end of the night when I go to sleep, I'm like, what else can I be doing? And I feel like I don't know. It's just a lot for me right now. I'm like sometimes overwhelmed, but I cannot stop because I feel like it's important for all of us to keep moving forward.
When you first saw the video, whenever that was, whether it was the second day after it happened or if it was just yesterday after it happened, Brandon, when you saw the video of George Floyd there with the officer's knee on his neck and stuff, what was your immediate reaction to that?
So much anger because it's not the first time I've seen videos like that of how police treat the Black communities, and it's just so unfair. And at those moments, yes, it was recorded and I was able to like, share it and educate other people about it. But I also felt so powerless in that position. And it's just how I felt about it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to go down, I'm going to continue to go down this road with you, Brandon, okay? All right, because you used some pretty interesting terms there, all right? You said earlier in a phrase, you said that you wanted to do something, but you're not sure that you're doing enough. And now you say that you also said you felt overwhelmed, and now you say you feel powerless, okay? How do you move forward in overcoming those types of emotions?
To be honest with you, I'm still trying to figure that out because I honestly do not know. Sometimes I see myself talking with other people and going to these protests and rallies and being connected with everyone on this certain issue. It just gives me that motivation that it's progress in some way. So whatever makes you feel like you're doing something, I would suggest to just keep doing it if it gives you that feeling of activism that you want.
Yeah. Okay, Tomi, coming to you now. These feelings of being overwhelmed, these feelings of being, powerless. You lead a pretty interesting group, the Hispanic American Leadership Organization on campus. And I'm sure that one of the conversations you guys have had, at least within recent months and years, has been some of the stuff associated, with people coming into the country, leaving the country, all that. I mean, a lot of these things kind of get enmeshed in the same big ball, so to speak. Okay, and so as being a female of color, okay, and seeing these types of things happen and everything, how do you deal with, if you do have them, the issue of powerlessness and some of the things about not doing enough? How do you deal with that?
So how I've been dealing with this is, honestly, I haven't had a lot of people say they feel powerless anymore. People are figuring out what they need to do. The biggest thing I've been trying to do with people is talk before we act. We need to figure out how we're all feeling before we act, because acting doesn't do anything if you're really getting a general message. Get your general message that you're trying to send out there, put together. Because if you're just acting, you're not really doing anything. You need to figure out what you can do so it can be effective.
Okay, all right. Tranise, talk about acting. What are some of the things that you can do to move the conversation forward and hopefully to reach some type of resolve? Open up your mic if you would there, Tranise. Thank you.
You mean like at the school or just in the country as a whole?
In the country as a whole.
This is one of the things where you have to push in people's face. I feel like a lot of people are nervous to like do certain things, but this is like something you have to push in people's face, because I've been seeing a lot of people who says, why are you saying Black lives matter, all lives matter? My favorite quote is, all lives won't matter until Black lives matter. So I feel like this is something we have to push in people's face, make it known, whether it's protesting or whether it's rioting or looting. Now, I don't agree with, looting everything, but I feel like people are angry in this country. So the fact that people are protesting or rioting, as the media is trying to call it, they're doing it for a reason. We've been oppressed for nearly 400 years. So for us coming like this, and for us, some people just now seeing that it's a problem in 2020, this is why so many people are mad. And this is why so many people are just at the point where they're like, you know what, we're going to tell you how we feel, and this is why we feel like that. And that's how I am. I feel like, of course, not forcing on anybody, but I'm going to throw it in your face to make sure you know about it. So that's just how I feel about that. And just to get the country as a whole, I feel like we have to throw it in their face, because if we just keep kind of like dancing around it, nothing's ever going to get solved. And I feel like in the past, that's what we've done a lot. Of course, don't be aggressive with it, but I just feel like, we got to make it known how we are feeling right now.
Now, a moment ago, Savannah was saying that she came from a small town, and that, there's a certain element of passivity. And I'm using that term, that's not her term, I'm using that term. And she said that that's pretty much taught. And so you're saying that you need to be able to put this issue right in front of people. And if I'm reading what Savannah said earlier, when you put it right in front of people, they can't necessarily handle that.
Well, I think, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. And not being able to handle that, they shut down.
Yeah,
And
I get that, but I get where she's coming from. I get that, but
no, don't get me wrong. She didn't say that. Okay.
No, I know.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you relate to that when you put it in there, when you put it in their face?
It's basic human rights. And I feel like if you shut down over me trying to exercise my basic human rights, then that's a problem. You know, I don't shut down when, you force, not saying, Savannah, but when people, when white America has forced all of their culture onto us, we couldn't shut down. So I feel like you have no room to shut down when I'm trying to show you what I've been through and what my people have been through for over the last 400 or 21 years. I'm 21 years old. For the last 21 years, so much has happened since I was born. So if you shut down from what I'm telling you, from my Black America standpoint, then I just feel like that's a problem.
I agree.
Yeah, I see Savannah's ready to get in on this. Go ahead, Savannah.
No, it's frustrating for me because coming from that small town and then coming to Washburn, you realize that there are so many different people. And then it's hard to like look back at my friends from high school to realize that they have a different standpoint on this. And that every time I try to explain it to them and educate them, they just shut down. And it's frustrating because I have built this group, like at We Are First, we have people from every side of every different culture. And we come together and we are unified and we act as one and we believe as one. And it's just frustrating because talking to the people back home, you're like, you need to be educated on something that is happening in our everyday life. You can't just shut down.
Yeah. So Joanna, I'm going to come to you, and then Tamika, I've got a pretty interesting question for you. All right, being our law student and stuff. All right, so Joanna, your thoughts related to what I just said, because that's what happens. We have these things that happen in our culture, okay, and they're big in the news, and actually they're big all around the world for a small amount of time. Okay, and when I say small amount of time, it may be a week, it may be 2 weeks, it may be even a month. Okay. But at the end of it, as PJ and I were talking before we actually started this, there never seems to be any type of resolution to this. And that's because people get really excited for a moment. And then they go right back to being, well, I don't know what I can do. Well, I don't know how that's going to impact my life. And so then they, in essence, begin to ramp it all down again. Your thoughts related to that, Joanna?
I think we do become very complacent, especially coming like right out of the Civil Rights Act in the 60s, and how we feel one little step of progress is enough and we don't continue to fight after that. And especially now today, I get a lot of my news from like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook and stuff, because how the media, I'm just going to say it, that the media always wants to portray Black people as in the wrong, and how they're showing more violent protests than they are the peaceful protests. And that's just to discredit us and to make us look more like animals. But they're not showing the full story. And so we just need to continue to fight instead of just going on a trend. Like there's always the hashtag George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and there's always going to be another person if we don't continue to fight every day. And so that needs to be on like a social level and holding everyone accountable. And like people come to me and they'll ask like, what can we do to help? And it's basically just telling like your friends, your coworkers, and especially your family, if you see that they're racist or holding any microaggressions or prejudice, you need to tell them that that's not okay. So I even do it with my friends. Like sometimes they're like, well, it's more xenophobic than racist. They're like, I look chinky or something. And chink is like a prejudice term towards like Chinese people. And so just letting people know that little things they do is wrong until it sprawls out into outright racism.
You used a term there that I want to kind of explore a little bit, because it's kind of like the ones that we talked about, oh, maybe about 10 or 15 minutes ago. You know, you used the term, you used the phrase continue to fight, okay? All right, and just utilizing the term fight related to this issue seems to be one of those things that is offensive to other groups when it comes to the way that Black Americans have to deal with this type of issue. So when you say continue to fight, it almost makes other people think, uh-oh, you know what? Now you're being aggressive towards me. You're being, you know, somewhat offensive and this type of thing. How do you change the verbiage to complete a narrative that opens up other people's minds to hear what it is that we're dealing with? Does that question make sense to you, what I just asked?
So like basically changing fight so it doesn't sound negative.
Yeah. I mean, how do you do that? Because it is a fight.
That's what I agree with you. It is a fight. So it's not really possible. I mean, you could say negotiations, but you can't say negotiations if they're not willing to speak with you, because we have tried peaceful protests and that still hasn't got us to where we want to be, like full equality and not being scared to go out in our own neighborhoods. So it has to be a fight. And fights look different. Like people say like violent protests or peaceful protests, but there's not a right or wrong way to protest. It's just an objection and disapproval of what the status quo is. And so sometimes the fight will be violent because people aren't listening. And so you can't just speak to people if their ears are cut off. And so sometimes you have to show them, and like, I don't completely agree with looting and rioting, but I understand the anger and frustration. And it's terrifying that our president gets away with saying, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, when the looting started because the shooting has already begun. And so we can't really change the narrative because they already have this idea in their head in which the media is giving them, which is always that Black people are wrong.
Yeah. Victoria, your mic is open. PJ, your mic is open. Do you guys want to respond?
Yeah, I didn't want to cut her off. Definitely not. But I mean, there would be no need for a protest if things were peaceful. I mean, a protest isn't pretty, whether it's peaceful or not. This is not something, you know, that people show up to and have fun and have a good time and looking for a good turnout. That's not what a protest is. That's not why we're out here. That's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's just simple facts. I mean, we're out here because we're being oppressed. We're out here because we're being murdered. We're out here because we're being just treated in the rawest way for over 400 years. It's like, okay, I mean, the marching, we march, we protest, we riot. I mean, that we get their attention when there's riots, when there's looting. Okay, now we're paying attention. Even speaking on Topeka, Kansas itself, even with a hint of that in the air, then we get their attention. Because a lot of names were spoken, and there's a lot of fallen that have fell to police brutality. But I mean, let's not forget about Dominique White. Officer Cruz is still on the force and will retire with benefits.
Yeah. Victoria, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, so based off of the verbiage, I think what I want to say is, you know, the term fighting may seem negative or anything like that, but I don't think that we should change that term, because as PJ and Joanna said, we've been oppressed and we are fighting for the injustice that is happening to the Black community. And it's been happening for 400 years. And if that term makes people uncomfortable, then they should be uncomfortable, because then we, as he said, PJ said, we have their attention. They should be uncomfortable, and if it makes them listen, then we should not be changing anything, because this is the only way that we can get things done, is if they're listening to us. And that term is obviously making them listen.
Yeah.
So if they're uncomfortable, that's a good thing, because that means we can start getting stuff done. I was about to cuss. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. Tranise, did you have something?
Yes, I did. I have something to say about this and about, connecting it back to Washburn wise. I
Mhm.
feel like, kind of like Victoria was saying, we have to make them uncomfortable. I feel like if we just, like I said before, if we dance around the topic, nothing's going to get done. And I feel like at Washburn, we do that a lot, especially as African American students, our students of color at that school. We have to dance around with our white, our non-POC people a lot. And I feel like it starts at small. I feel like we need to start at Washburn. This is a good forum to talk about, what's going on around the world, but we need to also talk about Washburn as well. Because Washburn, in my experience, has been a very almost, I want to say, I don't want to say oppressed to me, but it's been like a lot of microaggression thrown my way, or a lot of just little racist and just a lot of dig comments at my skin color. Now I'm very proud to be a Black woman, but I feel like a lot of people at that school, they're intimidated by, anybody who's proud to be Black, or anybody who's not, who is not white. They feel they want us to conform to how they want us to be, and what they want us to do. So that's just, I feel like we need to start small, and we just need to, go into it, because this is a very good forum to, also point out the injustice at Washburn, which there is quite a few that has happened in my 3 years of being there.
Yeah. I haven't forgotten you, Tamika. I still have that question for you. Okay, go ahead.
I want to comment though before we jump to the question. So
Sure.
I think something that's imperative is that when we're having these conversations with people that don't look like us, or when we're using proper verbiage, I think it's important to target your audience and remember that a lot of times the reason they're offended is not because we're using the term fight, but because we're making them own and understand that they have white privilege. There is a firm difference between white privilege and white supremacy. So when I'm having the conversation with fellow colleagues or people of different color, I make sure to point that out. I'm not attacking you, but I'm trying to get you to acknowledge that you have white privilege. I'm also trying to educate you to see that there is a wall of structural racism that has existed for over 400 years. It is embedded in our legal system. So there's multiple things that have to be done to tear that brick wall down. And so just kind of be mindful of your audience, who you're speaking with in the audience. And so trying to honestly get them to accept, I do have white privilege, and that's fine, but I refuse to have white supremacy, because then that is me oppressing other races, and that goes against the liberty and justice for all. And whereas it's a well-known fact that when the Constitution was written, it was written for white men only. It was not written for women. It was not written for people of color. But we are here now, and the Constitution was written so vague that it was left to interpretation, because the founders knew that it would need to be further interpreted. We're at that stage now. We have the women's movement happen, where we fought for our rights as women to have the voice, and we're still working on that. And so now people of color, we are still fighting. And the thing that I feel has happened, which plenty of the other panelists have already voiced, is we're not consistent. We become complacent. So if there's justice for a murder that has happened, we're complacent with just that justice. And then when the media spotlight is gone, we go back to believing everything is okay, or we go back to being powerless. It is important for us to stay unified. It is very vital for us to stay consistent and to keep battling, because you are going to have to chip away consistently to build down that brick wall of systemic racism.
All right, so I'm gonna come back to you, Joanna, because I started this with you with some of your comments, when you used the term fight in a very sensible manner and stuff. So you want to finish up this little thing about what type of common vernacular and what types of terminologies we can utilize in order to keep a conversation going and possibly reach some resolve with issues like this. What do you think? I mean, you've heard from some of your colleagues here.
I agreed with Victoria and how she said we should say fights because it makes them uncomfortable. So it's moving them out of their space of just like, they have to acknowledge that they have a privilege. They have to acknowledge that they do hold some prejudice, even if they're not fully racist, that they do have something that they could have against us and not fully understand it themselves. And so I hear a lot of people saying that it's not their job to teach them and that they should go to Google to find more information. And I do agree with that, but sometimes you can find false information online. And sometimes, in how Savannah's, how she said she's from a small town, I do have a friend and her family were Trump supporters, and but they changed their views. And I understand that if you're in a small town that you don't always have the proper education. Even in my high school, we didn't have like Black history classes. I don't even think we have one at Washburn. I think they just now have been starting to try to get like those type of education courses for us. And so we do need to like educate people, even if we don't feel it's our job. If the system fails to do so, then we have to do so individually.
May I?
Yeah, you guys are giving me so much stuff to talk about. You know, I'm sorry. Go ahead, PJ, and then I want to come back to Tranise, because I want to hit on something that you said earlier, and I promise you, to me, I have not forgotten. I have that really good question for you. Okay, go ahead, PJ.
There's woke white folks out there, and white folks it's not my place to speak to a white person about white privilege. I don't have white privilege. I don't know nothing about white privilege. It's the woke white folks that need to talk to their peers and take it to a point where it's not enough to just not be racist. You have to be anti-racist. You have to nip it in the bud immediately. All the private conversations and the Snapchats and the break room talks and just when you're in your own privacy, that's when you need to be standing up for it. That's when you need to be shutting it down and saying it's wrong and calling it out. That's the step of what needs to be done.
I agree with
you can't sugarcoat it and laugh and joke about it in your own privacy and still say you're not racist. Okay, you may not be racist, but you're not anti-racist either.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joanna.
Oh, I was just saying I agree, and how people need to hold their family members and friends accountable for little microaggressions that they have inside their homes. And just because you're not outwardly going and like attacking a Black person for simply being Black doesn't mean you're not racist. And how he said you have to be anti-racist in order for the change to really come.
Yeah. Let me go back to Tranise. Tranise, you were the first one, I think, in our conversation here to utilize the term microaggressions and things that you have actually experienced on the Washburn campus. And it sounded like that was really important to you, that you wanted to maybe even expound on those things a little bit. So can you, if you feel comfortable, can you give us an instance of when you have experienced that microaggression and you know, and how it happened, why it happened, what was the situation? Do you feel comfortable in doing it? And if you don't, that's okay.
Oh yes, I definitely feel comfortable because this has been a lot. I started out with my freshman year. I was taking an English class. I won't say my English professor's name, but I was writing a paper about gun control. And I was, at the time, I was strongly against, you know, having guns out, because it was just a lot of, you know, gun violence against Black people and against just, you know, against everybody. And I felt like it was something that I was very passionate about. And I can't remember fully what I wrote, but I remember my professor telling me that it wasn't good enough and I needed to add more, and I shouldn't have talked about like the Black on Black gun violence. She told me explicitly that I shouldn't incorporate that into my paper because people just really don't care about that. So in that instance, that kind of, I don't know what you would really call that, but it was just kind of like, you know, wow, like I can't write about my experience being Black and how gun violence has, you know, affected me. And I personally thought it was a very good paper, and both of my parents, who are educators, told me, I don't think they're being biased, but they told me it was a very good paper as well. So I thought I did a good job and everything, and I ended up getting a C on that paper just because she didn't agree with me on my paper. And another instance was I work as an athletic trainer with the football team, and it's like a lot of I don't know if you call them peers, I don't know if we'll call them coworkers, because I'm kind of doing for work study, and that's kind of something they do for their job, for their degree. I kind of like experienced like a lot with them. I had to tell them just a lot about how Black people, we tend to get sick way more sicker than they do. And one of them told me that I'm using that as an excuse of why we don't like to go outside. And I was like, that's not very an excuse. It's proven that a lot of African Americans, a lot of minorities get way sicker faster when we're outside, especially in the rain, when we're outside breathing those air, like the air, we tend to get sicker and we tend to have trouble with our immune system. And they told me, I'm just saying that as an excuse and blah. It was just a lot of, I kind of felt like it was kind of hateful the way they were coming at me. But of course, I kept it professional because, I feel like they probably expected me to react in a certain way. And that's not what I wanted to do. And the last thing I wanted to expound on was when I cut my hair. I am a very confident person. So I just decided, I'm gonna shave all my hair off. And I actually experienced a lot from a lot of African-American males and I'm not African-American, but Caucasian males as well. They were just coming at me, just saying like, I look like a dude and whatnot. And I feel like a lot of Caucasian guys saw, my African-American males saying that to me. So they thought they could get that off. And I'm just like, no, like you guys, tend to come out Black women in a certain type of way, especially at Washburn. And I'm not one to go for it. So it's just a lot of things I've experienced. I could go on and on. I don't want to get lost in my thoughts, but it's just a lot of stuff that has happened that, me as a Black woman, I've had to deal with and kind of just get over with, if that makes sense.
I'm sorry, Tranise. I'm just kind of cracking up inside here because, for certain ones of us, we know that there's some things you just don't do, and you don't mess with a Black woman and her hair, no matter what.
A lot of them, I told them, I let them know. I said, you're probably just mad because I can pull off, being bald more than you can and you're a male. So that's why I told a lot of them.
Yeah. Well,
and also, Tranise, I'm sorry you experienced that. And I want to put emphasis on, I'm sorry for the interruption, Eugene.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I want to put emphasis on everybody that's out there listening. We need to protect our Black women. Step up, don't stand by and listen to nothing like that happens. And for whoever said that, if they're watching, how dare you?
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah. It is a cultural issue that we all deal with, and it's one that flows into some of the things that we have seen with the George Floyd issue. It's all a part of that. Well, we just don't understand you type of thing. I can remember, when I first shaved my head. I can remember the first time I put an earring in. Brothers and sisters had no issue. Hey man, that's cool. Hey, that's this type of thing. White folks were like, why'd you do that? And I'm like, so I have to give you a rationale for me being who I am. I get to choose. You don't get to tell me who it is that I am and why it is that I do what it is that I do. But that's an aside. Let me go to Tamika. Okay, here's my question, Tamika. I've been trying to get to this for a while. All right. So in a lot of places in this country, and we know this being Black folks, this happens all the time. This is not an unusual occurrence. Okay. It's just, there may be variations on it, and I'm talking about the George Floyd thing. There may be variations on it or whatever, but these things happen to our folks, both Black men and Black women. And they probably happen to Latinos, and other ethnic groups as well. Okay, but here's the thing. All right, so a police officer gets fired. Okay, and for some reason we begin to think, oh, you know what, that actually solved the problem. Okay, but we already know. For those of us that have dealt with law enforcement, for those of us that have dealt with the justice system and things like that, we know that that same police officer who got fired in this small town or whatever it is can next week go and apply for a job in the next county over and get a job, and do exactly what PJ said, be able to work for the next 20 years. And be able to retire with a pension and stuff. And they can do that with a state organization. They can do that with a county organization. They can do that with a city organization. So just because they've committed these atrocities against someone and been fired, that doesn't necessarily solve the issue that we have in our community. So let's talk about justice. Tamika. I mean, you're a law student. You're dealing with a whole bunch of things currently, and I know that you're probably looking for ways that you can make the world a better place going forward. Tell me about the concept of justice and what that might mean for us as Black Americans in this country.
So justice overall, it truly means equality for all. So the law as it stands, in other words, you should be guaranteed that the rights guaranteed to us by our constitutional rights will work for you no matter the color of your skin. And in order for that to happen, for me, there has to be multiple steps, because you have to recognize that racism can either be done in a covert manner or an overt manner. And so some people don't recognize the racism when it's coming. And so whereas you have lawyers who are focusing on things like system reform for the police officers. So we're looking at certain laws, because it is true that, you know, there's no one uniform state level law that governs all law enforcement officers the same. So in some states, it's already against the law to restrain from the neck up, but not in all. So trying to get that to be uniform across the board, trying to get, you know, more people of color on board, trying to do community relations. And so there are things that are being done from that perspective where, you know, lawyers are pushing out bills and trying to challenge policies and get uniform so that we can fight for that justice. But there has to be that dual prong approach. We need the community. We need the voices to be heard. We need the tough conversations to be had. Like I said before, that wall in racism is there. Being a law student, I remember going in, I was very optimistic. Like, I live on the Missouri side, and I strategically chose Washburn because based on my experience and the level of regression that I had experienced myself in America, I knew that America was going to be ready for another landmark case. I knew that change needed to come. And so I wanted to go to Washburn to be prepared, you know, with attorneys that had already done such a thing, because we hold Brown versus Board on our shoulders. Like, that is the highlight of the Washburn Law School. And so we want to make sure we're also bringing that into the 20th century. So I strategically came here. And so when I initially came in, I was like, oh, you know, for Justice for All, we just need new laws. We need to set new laws. We need to set new policies. And I remember having my face cracked, for lack of better terms, sitting in con law and realizing a lot of those laws are already there. And so then you look and you say, how can this be that these laws are there, but they're not working for me? How can that be? And, you know, it is heartbreaking for me because I had to tell my kids, this is the law, but son, based on the color of your skin, it may not protect you. And to be a law student, I have to say that it is something that is shameful, it's hurtful, it has brought me to tears, but it made me realize you have to push forward to do more than just hit on the legal side of things. We have to also do the community service work part, which is, like I said before, having those tough conversations with people who don't look like you. And so I set out on this mission to bring unity in this moment and to get fellow classmates who don't look like me to have open dialogue with me, see what my perspective is, empathize with me, ask questions to me, so then you can be moved with compassion and go back to your community that I may not be able to reach and educate them. And that's how we start to slowly break down that wall of systemic racism, so that when policies are coming out, we can roll with them. Also get involved with like I know for law students, it's our local bar associations, but also reach out to like NAACP. They have national township hall meetings where you can see what they're doing, because there's strength in numbers. And if we all get behind the same agenda versus everyone trying to do their own little agenda, we're more likely to get change done. And this time we have to keep our eye on the ball, because like I said, in the past, I think the issue has been that we were complacent with them saying, oh, we're just arresting this officer. Like, it was like we were throwing the bone and we were content with that, not realizing how deeply rooted this issue is. And so now we know we just have to remain committed to doing it. Even when the media stops, we still have to keep going. We still have to have those tough conversations. We still have to fight to look at laws, especially, you know, like the systemic police reform. Get to know your state local officials, pull up your state's constitution, figure out what are the laws that are governing the local law enforcement in your area. And don't be afraid to use your voices to speak up when something is done outside of that. Like, you know, now we know that investigations are done in-house. Well, laws are now being passed to have them happen outside the house. So when, you know, if investigation happens, it happens. Yesterday at the march that you all organized, thank you, Savannah, it was really nice. I spent time talking to the Topeka police chief. We wanted to find out, hey, how did the body cams work for you all? How long are you storing this data? What are the laws that help you guys to do that? So definitely engaging in those conversations, because the more we know, the more we're able to impact change.
Hey, that was well said. You're hired.
Thank you.
Cassandra, let me bring you into the conversation here. Simple question for you, okay? Probably the answer is not going to be all that simple though, okay? So the question is, does racism in its rawest form, does that impact your education?
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like especially systemic racism within academics is a big problem, just because having professors that don't look like you and that don't understand where you're coming from can impact the way you learn and the way that you go and approach them. Just because a lot of the time they don't understand and they don't get it, and they might just base that off of you just not understanding the information, but it's actually just not understanding where you come from.
Do you have a specific or a general example which you can relate to us?
Yes, I am actually a DACA recipient, so I don't get funding, but I applied to UMKC's 6-year medical program, and unfortunately they told me that they weren't even able to consider my application because I was a DACA recipient. So for my education, that was kind of like a slap in the face, and that was a big realization that it's not based on your high school GPA, it's not based on a lot of things, but your status in this country.
Interesting. The reason I ask the question, and the reason I ask it that way is because what I find is that if you don't have experience with something, then it's real easy to discount that thing. Okay. And so if you don't see people that look like you, then basically they don't exist. Okay. And I look at the thing that happened, you know, in Minneapolis, and I've got a number of friends who live in Minneapolis, and I haven't been up in a while, but, you know, I do go up there and hang out from time to time. And I think what people in Minneapolis would say to you is they would say that we're a pretty diverse community. And I think that they would say that they're relatively proud of the diversity that exists in that community. Okay. But I think at the same time that people will say that in a very general sense, they also don't see each other. And because they don't see each other, and because they don't interact with each other, and I'm going to get to the part about media here in a little bit, but then all of their thoughts, ideas, concepts, you know, psychological aspects are wrapped up in what they see and hear from others, not what they experience themselves. And I think that's kind of what you were getting at with the classroom thing. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with the incident that happened in Minneapolis, is that, you know, you begin to treat people in a way that if you've never experienced, you know, Black folks, then you begin to think, well, all Black folks are this way. And they're not, you know. And so in the classroom for you, Cassandra, I think what I heard you say is that, you know, if people don't know you, if people have never experienced anything close to you, then it's very difficult for them to relate to you. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and I also feel like that's where the phrase "all lives matter" comes from, just because those people that have the privilege to be able to say that don't recognize that this doesn't happen within their community. Their communities are not getting shot up constantly and constantly being abused by police like the Black community is. And that's why they feel like they have the right to say that, because they can't recognize that privilege that they have in their community.
Yeah. You know, one of the hardest things in the world to do is to recognize privilege. You know, you take it for granted. Yeah, you just take it for granted. All right, so I'm going to go to the media question, and I'll open this up. Any one of you can jump in on this, whomever would like to open their microphone and talk about it. But, you know, one of the things that you guys kind of hit around the edges of was the fact that, you know, we're portrayed a certain way in the media. And when I say we, I'm including myself in that because we're talking about Black males, okay? Not to offend any other ethnic group, okay? But specifically, we're talking about Black males for this. And so we are portrayed in a certain way in the media. But I think that comes from the broader culture. And I do think it is systemic, and I do think it is by design that we are portrayed that way. So what is it that we can do differently to change that and to hopefully get people to develop relationships with each other that go beyond what they just see on television? Anybody? Tranise?
I feel like we can't, honestly, I feel like we shouldn't feed into what the media tries to portray us as, because I know in my experience from going to these protests and seeing it, a lot of it is from the police starting a lot of stuff. Like I know in Kansas City, they the news reported that it was a police car on fire, but come to find out, the police started that fire in their own car, and they said, oh, you know, the rioters in Kansas City started this. So of course, as you know, as Black people or just people period, you know, you're gonna get mad when somebody is saying, okay, you're saying we started this fire when we really didn't. I just think as Black people, we shouldn't, you know, feed into what the media is trying to do it, but we're mad. All of us are mad. We've been going through this for too long. So I think, you know, of course we're trying to feed in, but the media, they play a big role in what they're showing people, and they are the ones who need to stop it, you know, stop first. I don't want to sound like a kid, but, you know, they are starting a lot of what's going on. They're saying, oh, you know, the protesters are doing this. It's not a peaceful protest, but a lot of it has been aggravated by the police officers. Like even, for instance, it was a Black male talking to them in Kansas City on the plaza, and they pepper sprayed him and brought him to the ground. So what I'm saying is they're not showing all that. They're only showing what they want people to see. And yeah. I can't say us because I know the facts. I know, for instance, you know, KCPD, they are really treacherous out here. So I already know how they are and how they come out. So it just bothers me that the media they're not giving the full story. They're only showing what they want people to see or what they think people want to see when people already know the facts.
Yeah. So let's go to Victoria, then Cassandra, and then Tamika. Victoria?
So for starters, I want to say the media is all for ratings. That's what their main goal is. So they will portray us any way that they want to portray us for them to get some ratings. And the problem with that is people sit there, you know, they watch their Fox News and their MSNBC and their CNN, and they don't sit there and they don't do the research. I, as a Black person, you know, I'm half Black. I get labeled as an aggressive woman because I have a very straightforward personality. I'm in your face, I'm blunt, okay? That's not okay with me. I'm not aggressive, okay? Just because I have a aggressive personality doesn't mean that I'm aggressive. And I don't like being portrayed as an angry Black woman just because of the way that I am, okay? And that's the media that does that. So the problem with the media is people don't sit there and do their research, and they don't sit there and try to get out of the media to get to know us, to get to see how we really are. The media is going to portray us the way that they want us to be portrayed for their ratings. And that's all that it is. And that means that people who are sitting here portraying us as angry Black women or angry Black men or anything like stereotype, they need to get that out of their head, and they need to do their own research, and they need to get out of their comfort zone to get to know us and figure out how we really are as people. Because just like everybody else, we are human beings with personalities. We are human beings with rights and liberties. And we, just as you wouldn't want to be portrayed as a stereotype, does not mean that we don't want that either. You know what I mean? It's not fair to us that the media gets to portray us any way we want to, but they don't get to portray white people the way that they are. Like the white people are out here, I'm sorry, they're doing a lot of the looting, they're causing a lot of the problems, not the Black people. And I'm sorry, but that's the sad truth. And we're getting blamed for it because of the media. Get out of the media. I'm sorry.
Apologize.
Yeah.
Don't apologize for that. And those are facts. Those people who were arrested for the situation out in front of the police department, the one Black guy in there had nothing to do with the riot at all.
Mm-hmm.
The mugshot shown nothing to do with the riots at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As far as what needs to be done, I mean, with it being local like this, it's like, okay, If they would have only immediately arrested 4 people, that would have saved thousands from being arrested and across the nation. 4 people, 4 arrests.
Yeah.
These steps to change can be simple.
Yeah.
They gotta want to do it. They gotta care.
Yeah, gotcha. Cassandra?
Yes. I would just like to say that, Victoria, I don't feel like you need to apologize. I feel like what you said is very true. And if some people are offended, it's because they need to be. I also think that these riots are portrayed as like bad things and as such, just because they are done and organized by Black people and by people of color. But if it was anything else, for example, the rioting and the people with their guns outside the White House trying to get social distancing like out, like for what? And it's just like, it's shown and you can see it. And if you don't, then that's a problem, because they're only portrayed as this way because it is for people of color and it is for Black people, because that's how they want to portray people like that.
Yeah. Tamika?
Okay, so if you look back at our history, you will see that Black anger has been manufactured for far too long. It really has. It went from, after slavery, you had the Black faces where they would show videos and movies of white women being robbed by Black men. And then you would constantly see ads like, President Trump, for example, he was infamous in the Central Park 5 case because he took out a whole ad calling them thugs and they needed to be brought to justice. And he knew nothing regarding that case. And they were not guilty of the crime to which they were being charged. But America has thrived in that wall of racism that they have needed to keep in place to oppress people of color. A big part of that wheel has to be the manufacturing of Black anger, because if you don't see them as fearful, then you won't bite to the policies and laws that we're telling you we're trying to pass, right? And so it's been passed. So a prime example that we can all see of this is something that happened recently. So you saw implicit bias when Drew Brees made his comment recently. And, he apologized and things like that, but then you instantly saw Laura Ingraham. And Laura Ingraham, the Fox Friends anchor newscaster, I don't know what she is because I don't watch Fox Friends, but I did pull this up just to make this point. She actually, when LeBron and Kevin Durant attempted to voice their concerns on what was happening and give their political advice, she told them, shut up, you're designed to play ball and nothing more. So if we're talking about how the media portrays us in anger, we also have to talk about how they look at our men in the athletic realm of things. That is a very real response. Like her response was legit of, this is how white America sees you. We see you as you're good to dribble the ball, shut up and don't do anything more. And she was very blunt to display that. And then when Drew Brees, when she responded to him, she said, well, he's allowed to have an opinion, right? He's a person. So this is outrageous that he's not allowed to have an opinion. And so you see not only the media consistently portraying and manufacturing our anger, but you see them portraying this implicit bias and bluntly stating this implicit bias, which is feeding back into the systemic racism to say, see, this is why we need this law. See, this is why we need that. And then if you couple that with assembly line justice, you get this whirlwind of systemic racism that you have. So assembly line justice is when, criminals are coming through so quickly. And I worked as a criminal defense, I interned with the criminal defense attorney for almost a year. And I will say that I found myself settling into the assembly line justice because so many of them are guilty of crimes. And so you do start to say, okay, so do all people that look this way commit the crime? But lucky for me, he had a diverse group of clientele. He had the white people committing crimes as well as the Black people, like everybody was committing the crimes. But I said, I thought we were doing this to help protect people, take me to be someone innocent. And he did. He took me to visit with an inmate that was falsely accused of something to help me remember, this is why we do what we do. These are the laws we sit down to protect. And so just the way we fight against the media, we start putting our own narrative out there, start being mindful of where we spend our money. Because the one thing that I did actually learn in law school was that our money matters. Currency matters. Be mindful of where we spend our money. Look at those newscasters. How are they reporting? Stop funding them. Push for news anchors to come on there that will get your point of view across. And you're even starting to see it now on the media. Like if you watch the news at nighttime, you'll see different anchors reporting in different ways. Like I'm again on the Kansas City side, and I'll watch 41, and they report so differently than Channel 5. Channel 5 will use derogatory verbiage, in regard to the protesters, and they want to focus on how violent it was, versus Channel 41 will say like, hey, this protest has been peaceful all night until we've had these 6 arrests happen after hours. We don't know what's happening. And so we, though, can be mindful of where we spend our money and support the news anchors that are helping to push our narrative over to the airways.
I think you've hit on something that is a huge cultural issue for us in this country. And when you take a look at not just Blacks, but when you take a look at, various ethnic groups, okay? What you find is that our culture has a way of victimizing those ethnic groups first, okay? And then in order to keep that victimization alive, you demonize that same culture. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes this circuitous way of getting things done. There's an oppressive way of keeping, the system afloat. And then what you have to do is you have to demonize those folks that are part of that in order to perpetuate that type of system. Would anyone care to agree or disagree with that analogy that I just put out there?
I agree with the analogy you just put out there, that the media, are you saying like the media kind of demonizes?
Media, everything. Yeah,
everything. I agree with you 100% because like I said, in Kansas City, you just see a lot of the news. It's crazy because I see the news, but I've also been at the protest. So I've seen like how we gather, and it's very peaceful. It's a lot of times the cops and the police and the SWAT and whoever they have there, because it's a whole bunch of people, I don't know what they are because I can't take them seriously anymore. They're there and it's like they're looking for a fight. Like I remember going, I think on Sunday, and you just saw them all in their riot gear. Mind you, it was probably like 2:30 in the afternoon, and it looked like they were ready for a fight. So what I'm saying is they demonize us for coming out there and for fighting for change and justice, but they don't demonize them for, pepper spraying us, tasing us, tear gassing peaceful protests. Because a lot of the Kansas City protests have been very peaceful. It's the KC police who's been antagonizing a lot. They've been killing us too. A lot of it, what happens in KC does not get recognized. And honestly, it took me going to these protests to know that a man named Ryan Stokes was killed by KCPD and other Black men. I had never known that while living here. So it's just, they don't, and you won't see that on KCTV5. I don't watch 41 News. I need to start watching that. You just don't see a lot of that on KCTV5 or Fox. I stopped watching Fox for a long time ago, but KCTV5, I've been watching it for a minute, and seeing how they kind of just talk about the protests or the riots, how they've been calling it. It makes me sick because if you guys were out there, if you guys will see that it's the police. Like, and what killed me one day was me and my sisters, because we've been going, we saw the I think it was a SWAT team. They were just in the bus. They shut down one of the buses, and they were all just in the bus going somewhere. I'm just thinking, you guys are doing all this for what? For a peaceful protest, which makes me sick. You guys, people commute on these buses. So for you guys to shut down a whole bus just to have the SWAT team or whatever get on the bus and travel, it just makes me sick that you guys feel like you need to do all this and line up in a line. Basically, like, it looked like it was an execution line, in my opinion. It was a lot going on, and I feel like the media really tries to make us seem like we're bad people, and it honestly, it doesn't surprise me. It just makes me sick.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Eugene.
Go ahead, PJ.
Mr. Ryan Kolovich would be interested in hearing a discussion on black crime. and I want to say we can have that discussion right after we have a discussion about what's going on in his personal life behind closed doors in his house.
And
black on black.
He has to realize,
like, is he serious?
Or let him know that the reason we hear so much about quote unquote Black on Black crime, it has to do with one, the zoning laws, the way that they have us living on top of one another in certain areas. It has to do with the drugs that they infiltrated into Black America. If you look back into the 70s, Black America was thriving. We had like a lot of people don't even know that there was such a thing called Black Wall Street.
Black Wall Street.
People don't even know that. And it was infiltrated, you know, even the Black Panther movement was infiltrated with drugs and things like that. But dare to also challenge, because I keep getting that a lot with the Black on Black crime. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut anybody else off. But there is white on white crime. There's like all other races crime on top of one another. The reason we hear about Black on Black crime, one, is because of the zoning laws that make it easier, where you can see that based off the way that they have us leaving with the green dot initiative, where we can't live outside of certain zip codes, to the level of poverty that our oppressed races in. And three, because the way the media is reporting. If the media would report crimes the same way, you would see that criminals are as equal as what I was seeing when I was in that criminal defense attorney position. Like I said, the way he represented, you saw, like I saw white prostitutes, I saw an Italian hitman trying to take out his wife. You know, I saw white Black men robbing people. You saw across the board that criminals, the color was the same. But because the war, when Nixon waged that war on drugs, it in essence was a war on African Americans. And President Clinton actually came back and he apologized to a lot of mothers for the war that he waged, because he claims he inadvertently realized that now he was putting out an attack on Black America. And he came back to apologize. So because you have all of that, you're able to see it be portrayed more. And because a lot of us, unfortunately, don't take the time to further educate ourselves either, other than what we see on the media or what the news is portraying to us. Because like, I think someone said Washburn doesn't have a Black history course.
Right, yeah.
Almost a Black nothing.
Which I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that. My undergrad, I did undergrad at UMKC and they absolutely had it. And that's how I learned so much. I went to school in an area where I was the minority. So there was not Black history, anything. I did not learn so much about Black history until I took 2 years of it when I was in undergrad. And you learned so much in that. So I apologize that Washburn doesn't have one. And that should be something that we're petitioning on like right away.
You know, let me just jump in here, just for the sake of truth and a little bit of knowledge, because I'm kind of the old guy here. You know, one of the things that you find out in our country is that Black people aren't the poorest people in the country. White people are, just by sheer numbers. There are more whites than there are Blacks, okay? There is no such thing as indiscriminate, crimes, in the sense of, you know, someone's gonna run up on you in the street and just shoot you, for no reason. Most crimes that are committed, and I'm talking about, when you talk about homicides and things like that, are committed by people that you know. I don't know PJ. There's no reason for me to stab PJ. There's a reason for me to shoot PJ, okay? You know, when you look around the country, those types of crimes occur among white family members, white husbands and wives that are getting divorced. You know, that's how those things occur. But it always comes out as if, well, you know, those Black folks, they're gonna come into your neighborhood, they're gonna drag you out of your house and they're gonna do something to you. We don't do that. We don't know you, okay? The same thing is true about Black crime, okay? You know, disproportionately, it might seem that way, but that's only because you report it more. I'm in the media. I know these types of things. There are actually more crimes committed by whites against whites than there ever will be with Blacks involved in things like that. And so when you begin to utilize things like, well, let's talk about, you know, Black on Black crime, what you're really doing is that you are trying to deflect from what the real issues are. And so you need to be able to go out and do your research and understand what it means for you in your community. Because for the folks that are on here, we're all intellectuals. We know what the real deal is, okay? And we know that what has happened with this thing with Mr. Floyd is a confluence of all of the things that our society has led itself to believe about, you know, other ethnic groups. You know, you set these things up. You set them up to demonize folks who don't look like you, okay? And then you're able to justify some of the things that you do associated with that. PJ, you want to respond? And I know, Victoria, I think you had something you wanted to say as well.
I'm apparently being corrected. There are some civil rights courses on campus. I've never taken them. I've been going to Washburn since 2013. I haven't even really been properly embraced by the school until being brought on the panel to discuss race a few years ago. There's been no college experience. Washburn is real conservative, to say the least, and it definitely doesn't feel like home.
Well, we'll talk about that, okay? We'll talk about that in just a moment. Let me hear from Victoria and then from Joanna. Victoria?
Yeah, if I could just touch on the media subject. So the media portrays their truth and not ours. They're not worried about our truth as Black Americans, and they're worried about demonizing us and taking, like, for example, what Tranise said a while ago, you know, they don't report everything. There have been a lot of, you know, Caucasian white people who have actually defended Black people. I have seen videos of white people just laying on top of Black people to protect them from the police. But the media doesn't portray that because that's good. They don't want good. They want the bad. They want to be able to use the bad stuff to demonize us, you know? So that's why I say they want to do their truths and not ours. Now, if I can kind of switch the subject up just a little bit, Vanessa asked about the Latino community. So I am half Black and I'm half Latino, you know, and it's very obvious that, and we all know this, that racism is very prevalent in the Latino community. My mother she married my father, who was Black, and her uncle disowned her. And, you know, I kind of want to hear from my Hispanic friends who are on the panel, because I have yet to be reached out to by any Latino people. I have seen on the media, like, there are obviously Latino people who are very for the cause of Black Lives Matter, but I've seen a lot of people at, you know, Washburn say, well, what's the point? Why are we really caring about this? What about us? What about our problems that are going on in America? So if I would like to actually turn the subject on to them, because I would like to hear that.
So for those of you that self-identify as being Latino, okay, you know, would you please respond to that? Any of you?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Cassandra.
I absolutely do agree that there's a lot of racism within the Latino community and Hispanic community. And I feel like those are one of the hardest conversations to have as well, because you're trying to educate them and tell them about these things, but it's so deeply rooted into them and they don't see how it's like affecting other people. So it's definitely, like, I feel like sometimes it's even a harder conversation to have, just because you are so similar. People do struggle. So there shouldn't be a division between us and them. Does that make sense? We struggle differently, absolutely, but the struggle is there. And I've tried to do my part to educate my family and my peers, my Latino friends and Latino family members about it, because it's not okay. And it's something that needs to be changed for sure.
I agree with that too, because when I told some family members about this unity march and with the Black Lives Matter, and I was wholeheartely for this, they were like, well, what about us? This is not, when we say Black Lives Matter and when we're protesting and then when we're unity marching, we are not trying to deflect on what's happening in the Latino community. We are just trying to help people right now. It is not our business right now to say, what about us? If it were us, we would want everybody else in the Black community and the white community to come and help us. It is not our place to deflect the attention that's going on in the Black Lives Matter community towards us. It is not our business.
Especially because I would like to say that there has been protests for us and there has been resources for us, but they don't take the steps until it's too late, and they don't want to contribute until it's someone else's, like until someone else has the attention. They don't say, well, what about us? You had your chance. There was protests, there was things held for ICE, to abolish ICE, all kinds of things like that, and you didn't. Where were you at? So we have to take it upon ourselves to actually absorb what's going on, help out as much as we can. Although we don't face the same struggles, we can't fully understand it, but we are here to help.
Tomi, Brandon, thoughts, ideas you want to express?
Yeah,
You can go ahead, Brandon.
Okay, I completely agree with them. It is a very difficult conversation to have, especially with your family members. And what I do to them is I remind them of all the racist things that have happened to us. And I'm like, if we hate it so much and all this happens to us, why are you guys passing it down to the other communities? It's like we all are fighting for the same thing and we all have to come together. We're all human. Why are we passing down everything negative about this? And so that's just my thought.
Yeah. Tomi?
I think to really summarize what other people have said, that it's important to realize that we all have our own struggles. But right now, as said before, Black Lives Matter is really a cry for help. We have to help these people. Then hopefully once we start making progress, we can go back and help our people and get them away from ICE and abolish ICE. And I hope that people really learn from this.
Yeah. PJ, Victoria, you guys still have your mics open. You have a couple comments, and then I'm going to change the conversation to another topic.
I'm okay. I didn't even realize.
Okay, that's okay. It's all right. It's all right. Victoria, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Oh, I forgot to turn my mic off.
Oh, it's okay. It's all right. It's all right. Well, I want to go back to what PJ was saying earlier and some of the things that I see in the chat. And Danielle is our host, and I know that at some point we may want to get to any questions that we might have in the chat. And we're at almost about 30 minutes left in this conversation. So I will continue on until Danielle stops me and says that she has some more things in here that she wants me to entertain. But I want to go back to what PJ mentioned a moment ago. He used the phrase, and I'm not sure if I'm saying this the right way, so I'll say I'm paraphrasing. You said something to the effect that you didn't feel like you were being, and let me put this in context, okay? All right, because we're talking about these issues associated with what happened with George Floyd up in Minneapolis, which is kind of the ultimate ridiculous culmination of a societal ill that we have. But as a part of that societal ill, what I think I heard PJ say was that in his experiences, in his college experience here at Washburn, that he didn't feel like he was fully embraced, okay? I don't want to beat up on Washburn, or any other school for that matter. But I do think that opens the door for kind of a cultural discussion about how certain institutions can play a role in possibly changing this narrative, changing this discussion, and making relationships happen without them being forced and without them being contrived. And so I want to talk with each of you as much as possible about why you believe that your college experience should put you in a position where you are more open to diverse opinions, more open to diverse relationships, more open to different experiences in life. And I'll start with you, PJ, since you kind of opened this up.
I'm trying to choose my words wisely. There's a lot.
Should I come back to you, PJ?
There's a lot of curriculums and things that are supposed to broaden your horizons, that have nothing to do with your career of choice or whatever you're going to school for.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there should be more. I'm not a typical student, and that's not to say anything more or anything less about myself or other students. I'm a big black guy. The most conversation I've had with the security, for example, is assuming that I'm playing football or something of that nature. But it's just like, there's so many spaces here where I feel out of place. My major is social work. That is a career field that is dominated by white women. I'm like a dot in the classroom.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, and there's connections that have been made, but there's been no, like, I hear people that graduate from college and have lifelong friends and things of that nature. Before meeting Mrs. Swopes and the other staff with the diversity area of the program, it's just like, okay, like, I didn't really even talk to teachers. Dean Bird was a good fellow that was very helpful, but there's not really many experiences where it's just like, I love this school.
Well, it's interesting. So of you that are here, okay, I know Tomi, and I think, was it you, Victoria, that has been in Vespers? Who was it that was in Vespers? Yeah, is that you, Victoria? Is that right? Yeah. How many of you knew that I even worked on the campus?
Not me.
Yeah. That's I mean that says a lot about your college experience when you don't see someone that looks like you. Of the ones on this this panel, and I use the term self-identify as being Latino. How many of you have had a Latino professor in your classes?
I just had my first one last semester.
Okay.
I haven't had a single one, not even in elementary, middle school, high school, not a single one. Or black, to be honest.
Okay. Any of you had a black professor in your classes, male or female?
I did, and it was the worst experience I've had academically at Washburn. It was hard. It was like, what is this guy's problem with me?
Yeah. So I come back to it again, and I want to have each one of you kind of talk about that a little bit. How important is it for you to have someone that, not that you agree with, not that you like, but someone that you relate to in your college experience? Tomi?
I think it's important just because having someone to relate to you is just like, the professors care for you more. They try to go up to talk to you and figure out how you're feeling and how they can connect with you. And it just changes everything. I don't really know what else to say, but it really does matter because I feel like they look out for you more generally. And you do better in the classes.
And I'll use Tomi as an example, okay? Tomi and I met, about 4 or 5 years ago, and she was a high school student. And the way that we met, I was telling Danielle this story the other day after I found out you were going to be on the panel, is that every year, KTWU, we do an internship thing with business students from the high school program. And Tomi came in, and she was going to do a one-day internship with us here. And her and I met and got to know each other. And I showed her the place and told her some of the things that she was going to be doing. And next thing I knew, she stayed for a week, and now she's never gone away. I'm trying to get rid of her. But what I mean by that is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tomi, okay? You had a couple of options for going to school. And I remember one day you told me that you were interested in being in business, and you and I personally walked you over to the business school and got you all of their materials and stuff. And I think some of that may have, and you correct me if I'm wrong, may have had an impact on why you decided to come to Washburn. Is that fair?
Yeah, I had really great teachers of color who really pushed me to go towards Washburn because they're like, you can be great here. Then I met people like you, Eugene, who really pushed me, and they're like, I will walk you over, I will get you set up, I'll help you all the way. And it's just having people believe in you, which helps everything.
You know, and I'm going to assume that all of you have had mentors and things in your life, but the folks that you will accept in those roles are people that you probably have relationships, right?
Right.
You know, so talk to me, Savannah. You know, how does that work for you?
Well, I had my advisor for We Are First. She is also a WU 101 teacher for first generation students, and she is Latina. And I didn't really notice that much of an impact until I came to Washburn, and I realized that a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about different races coming here. And I didn't have that safe spot to look up to somebody until she was my mentor, until she was my WU 101 professor. Like now if I am feeling anxious, if I have a racist comment from somebody, I immediately go to her office or I immediately call her because I know that she is my safe space.
Yeah. What about you, Tomica?
So, like working in the legal field, I actually have several mentors, and they're from all walks of life. So for me, I personally don't believe that just having a professor of color is enough. It's great to have, but it's not enough. I think all professors across the board have to do the diversity and inclusion training because, you know, for example, like my contracts professor, when you look at him, you see a white man. But if you actually talk to him, he's not. He was like Caribbean, French, and mixed with a whole lot of other things having that conversation. But we were able to relate. And so some professors will relate to you for other reasons outside of the color of your skin. There's things that you all will have in common, or they'll like the vibe or something that you have saying and will go that direction. And so for me, it is imperative for places like Washburn to continue to have forums like this, not just for people of color, but, or let me say, not just for African Americans, but for like the Latino community, the LGBT community, like different people, so you gain their perspectives. Because, you know, I feel like a lot of schools have jumped on this diversity bandwagon, but they missed the inclusion piece. And if you don't have inclusion behind the diversity, then you're not actually gaining the benefits of diversity. Like diversity is just being able to say, hey, we have different people from different backgrounds here. And, you know, I think like the Netflix new diversity officer, she described it best. She said, hey, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being invited to dance. And I think that's what PJ was saying. He was like, I'm here, but nobody's inviting me to dance. There's still that stereotype, that hurdle that I'm having to get over. And so it is so vital to have the support of that. And then specifically for the legal community, like I'm pushing and I'm working with Dean Pratt now, because it's amazing to have a dean and to have the staff there that you see working towards pushing for diversity. And so my part to them was, as the students, we need to make sure we're also providing that place of inclusion. Because what I found in my 1L year was we had all the culture organizations, which were great, and I applaud them very much, but they're still focusing in silo. The inclusion piece is not there. And inclusion is something that has to be taught. So we need to get behind diversity and inclusion organizations, push them, and then push for all professors to also go through that type of training.
I'm going to go to Tranise now, because I just like it when Tranise talks. So Tranise, in the chat, I see a note from one of the Washburn professors. They're asking the question, what can Washburn do to specifically support social change? Talk to me about that, Tranise.
I think they should keep like ongoing dialogue between, between like, them and people, minority students there, because a lot of things won't change or socially won't change if you just keep talking to, Caucasian students. You have to talk to more people and get outside your comfort zone to learn more about social change and how to bring it, especially at a small school like Washburn. Because a lot of the people I've met and a lot of professors I've met, they've been very closed-minded. I've only been close with a few professors, and one of them wasn't even my professor. Well, actually, yes, she was. She was my professor, but I got close with her from a trip I went on from taking her class. So it's just that a lot of professors at Washburn, they're good at making relationships, but they're only good at making relationships with Caucasian students. In my experience, a lot of them really don't take the time, to get to know their minority students, or if their minority students are very intellectual, they're very surprised, and they show, even if you are surprised, don't show it so out loud. I don't know how to really say it. It's kind of, because it's kind of demeaning towards your students when you're just like, oh wow, I didn't expect you knew so much about the topic, when of course I'm a student in the 21st century. Of course I'm gonna learn about it, and if you think I don't know about it because of my skin color, then that's a problem.
Yeah. Joanna, go ahead.
I have to speak on what Tranise and Tamika said, and how just continuing the dialogue, but actually putting it to action, and like possibly having a mixer, and like how Washburn always says how they pride themselves on their diversity, but there is no inclusion. Like one of my professors, she literally thanked me because we have exchange students from Japan come, and I hung out with them for several days and just befriended them, and she thanked me because she sees that other students just will completely ignore them. So they come all the way to the US to learn about our culture, different people, but they don't get that experience at Washburn. They just come and then they attend their classes, then they're with themselves because no one is willing to get to know them. And they were very good people. I got to learn more about their culture. I taught them more about mine. And so people, like, they're just clicked up, and we just keep continuing to let that go on. But there needs to be something that will allow people to get to know each other. And like, so we need more courses. And BSU, they have been making efforts to get a multicultural center, but with that, it was almost approved, but then they decided not to call it a multicultural. They just decided to say it's an intersectional center, which doesn't do us justice, because it's an unused area. And so it's just giving this unused area, it's just saying, oh, you guys should come down here. But it's not giving the unused area the true purpose, what we had it intended for. And so there is a lot of diversity without inclusion.
Yeah, gotcha. Victoria, you were going to say something?
Well, yeah, so, it's been said, continue the conversations. However, in my experience, I want to see conversations happening. I'm a music major, and, I stand corrected. I've had one Latina professor who's no longer here, so I kind of forgot about her. But as a music major, I've been told that, like, I'm a minority. Like, Black people, they just don't do this because they're told that they can't do this. All through high school, I was told that I can't do this. I wasn't good enough to do this. I live in Johnson County. It's 97% white. And even then, I don't have people that I can look up to in my degree. At Washburn, there's no minority music majors. And the people that I have as mentors they're white, and they don't understand what, like, I'm going through. So I know Tamika said, for her, it's not just about the color, but for me, I'd want to see more people of color that I can be close to, because I feel like I'm missing out on that experience. I feel like I'm missing out on having someone who can kind of guide me through what I'm doing. I'll be a super senior, and that means that I'm already almost done with my college degree. But like, if I try to have these conversations with like my voice professor or like my violin professor, they can understand, but they can hear, but they can't understand like where I'm coming from, and even if they try. But if I had like a Black professor, they would be like, I understand what you're going through, and let's have a conversation. So like, for me, I want to see those conversations happening more and more often, because I'm personally not seeing those conversations.
I kind of want to jump in here real quick. We've got about 15 minutes left, and so that gives us plenty of time for discussion. But I know that for someone like Danielle, who runs a really important aspect of the university operation and stuff, for her, it's probably going to be more about specificity. Okay, we're very general in a discussion, okay, about things that that we think kind of move the conversation forward. But I think it would probably be helpful if, and we don't have to do this right now unless you have some thoughts and ideas, but I think one of her questions is, you know, so what is it specifically? You know, can you come up with one thing, two things, three things that are concrete that you would like to see, you know, her area, my area, any area on the university campus be able to do that will hopefully in the future stop another generation from encountering some of the things that we've seen over these last 9 days? What could some of that stuff be? That's a tough one, isn't it? You know, Cassandra?
I'm not sure if this is specific enough, but just being able to incorporate these conversations and these specific topics into the curriculum across the board in all majors, just because for me, speaking like specifically for me, I'm a science major, biology, pre-med track. We don't see it. I don't see a lot of people like me in my classes. I don't see a lot of advisors that are able to advise me as well as another advisor could, just because they're not in my shoes. So I just feel like incorporating these conversations at the beginning, knowing the statistics of how many people of color, how many Black people graduate in this degree and that degree, knowing how they got there and how they get help, how I feel like that would help a lot, especially in aiding undergraduates towards graduation. Because
you know, and so I'm gonna play devil's advocate on that one just for a second, all right? Because what will happen is that the purists, the intellectuals will tell you, well, science, mathematics, you know, that has absolutely nothing to do with racism and all of that other type of, you know, it's pure, it's a pure thing, it's science, you know? And so I look at something like that and I say, well, let's talk about the movie Hidden Figures, you know, where you got Black folks, Black females, you know, who helped to send people to the moon, you know, who experienced racism, you know.
Absolutely.
You see what I'm getting at? So you got to be able to move not just within the conversation, but a lot of times you got to be able to educate folks on what it is that they don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, educating those professors in the specific courses, I feel would definitely encourage them to have those conversations with their minority students in order to help them succeed.
Yeah, yeah. Tamika?
I would say, and mine is going to be geared towards staff as well as students. So the big thing is consistency. The same way that we talked about consistency in the media with George Floyd, a lot of times universities will only address certain things when issues like this happen. When tragedy strikes, then we become reactive versus proactive. And when it comes to diversity and inclusion, we have to be proactive. You have students of color coming into your institution that have different culture needs, different background needs. They're interpreting the information differently based off of those needs. So we have to stay consistent. And for students, we have to remain active. When the professors or the members are actually putting on something, try your hardest to attend. When they're trying to extend their hand to do it, because numbers matter. And the more that they can show that there's activity and that there's people coming, then the more they can go back to the board and say, look, here's our results. This is helping provide us more funding. This is helping your university be a better place. Let's do it. Because the reality is right now, like I said, diversity is high. Like when I was determining what law school I was going to go to, and I went to an LSAC forum, almost every single law school said, well, we have diversity, we have diversity. And what you'll find is some truly don't know what diversity is. As you start to engage and ask questions, you'll see that they don't. And then you'll find that others have the diversity piece, but not the inclusion. And so pushing for that, I think across the board with not just students, but also in staff, I think would help solve a lot of problems, but the accountability has to fall to both the staff being, you know, proactive, and then the students being reactive. We have to respond to them. We have to respond when things are coming.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate with yours as well. Okay. All right. So here it comes. You know, not only are universities educational institutions, but They're political institutions.
Mhm.
Okay. You know, they deal with a lot of constituents. Okay. They deal with alumni. They deal with students. They deal with staff. They deal with legislators. They deal with, you know, all kinds of things. All right. In just about any type of political institution, there's always the fear that if I move too far this way, I'm going to alienate someone over here. If I move too far this way, I'm going to alienate someone back here. And so how do you get people to understand that making investments are about doing the right thing, not about doing the most expedient thing?
Because
How do you do that?
the one thing about inclusion is that because inclusion is a piece that has to be taught, it shouldn't be expedient. If someone is teaching inclusion and it's done in an expedient manner, I would dare to challenge it to say that it's wrong. So because that's something that takes time, because when you're teaching someone inclusion, you have to realize you're going against, everyone has stigmas. To a certain extent, everyone has a form of prejudice already built inside of them from their norms. So you're going against trying to break that down in order to have an inclusive environment. And so it's something that will take time. And then going back to them to show this will benefit all. So like my approach, you know, I'm smart enough to know when I approach to say, hey, I want to do diversity and inclusion organization from the law school, I was smart enough to know I need to also look at what the legal community is doing now to make sure that I can say, hey, we can also market this for attorneys coming out to help them with jobs, but also what does the ABA standard say? Because the ABA is what governs us. And so the ABA has actually said that diversity is very important to them because it's the thing that demonstrates laws being made and administered for the benefit of all people. So find out what's governing your institution and let them see how inclusion can be vital, not just to one group of students, but to all students.
Okay, I'm going to go to Tranise and Joanna, and I'm going to ask you guys to kind of keep your remarks a little bit shorter since we're getting close on time here. Go ahead, Tranise.
Oh, Jo, she can go first. She was.
Oh, go ahead, Joanna.
Oh, I was just gonna say how people do have prejudice. Like my high school dissertation was about prejudice having evolutionary roots and how you'll group together to like protect yourself. But we're past that. But then one of my sources was racist babies and how there'll be a racial bias based on how if a baby have white parents, then they're going to be more in tune with white people. And so that's where we really need the exposure to like expose your children at a young age to like Black people and all Latino people, natives, any like cultural people and minorities, so they won't grow up with that bias and keep it and sitting in fear about things. And if you don't like continue the exposure as they grow up, then we get things like a lot of microaggressions where like personally I lived in Great Bend, and so it's majority white and Hispanic. And so I was like probably one of 3 Black people there. And so I got a lot of remarks like, oh, you talk white, you're not like those Black people. Like you're this type of Black girl, you're an acceptable Black person. And so that is like a huge microaggression that we always get if you grew up in the suburbs or just predominantly white places. And Washburn is like this too, in how I see a lot of students who have Black girlfriends or boyfriends or one Black friend, but they have been silent during these times because they only place value on that one Black person and not on like placing values on Black lives. And it's just their connection and how useful they are to their personal being.
Wow, very intuitive. Tranise?
To talk about kind of what Tamika was saying, how we should focus on professors and students. I think especially at Washburn, because I'm noticing that every year I return back to Washburn, I hear the enrollment is always dropping more and more as the years go on. And I think a lot of it has to do because it's not a big Black population, but I'm noticing a lot of the Black population at Washburn, it has gone down because it's not an accepting environment. It's only accepting if you play a sport. I'm noticing a lot of only Black people who are really celebrated and accepted at Washburn are either they play football, they play basketball, they're playing a sport. So the ones who aren't playing sport, they're more so thrown to the side and they leave. And I've always been taught that, you know, a lot of white people talk money. So I think that if, you know, Washburn wants to keep us here, they also need to learn that we're giving, like, we're basically the ones putting money in their pockets. So the more, you know, we're not being accepted, and the more it's a hard time for us to, you know, have an enjoyable environment at that school, the more of us are going to leave and more money they're going to be losing. So that's just a little tidbit I wanted to add in.
Wow, look at you talking capitalism here. All right. So this is the last question. I'm going to turn it over to Danielle. But one of the things that Danielle has done in her, and I'll call it relatively short tenure here, is that she's really expanded, you know, the offerings and things that happen for students of color here on the campus. And she's gotten me involved in a lot of different things, and she's gotten a lot of folks involved in the community, and she's been involved in a lot of community things. When she brings people to campus and stuff, and this is a question that was in the chat, when she brings people to campus and stuff, in some instances, not as many, okay, of the various ethnic groups show up for some of these events and stuff. And it's going to be hard to keep those things going if, in fact, you all don't invest and participate in those things. How do you help her to help you? Talk to me about that. I'm going to go to PJ.
We show up, we support. Whatever it is that's going on, Miss Danielle can attest to it. She's never asked me for anything and I didn't show.
Yeah.
You got to keep showing up. You got to support, you got to put the word out and keep showing up. I don't want to take up too much time. And there was a question, I don't know if I can real quick to address or not.
Yeah, make it really quick. Yeah.
Something was asked what can be done on campus specifically. And that's my same answer. You got to show up.
Yeah.
You see us out there marching, you see us out there protesting, don't let it just be us. If you feel like we feel, then you should be out there with us. Yeah. Don't watch from TV or Facebook or the sideline. You got to show up.
Yeah. Well, you know, to punctuate that, I will tell you that, you know, I made a pledge to Danielle years ago when she got on campus and she called me and everything. And I said to her, you know, I am going to invest in your success. And so when you need me to do something as much as possible, I'm going to be there for you. And that's real important. I apologize, Joanna. I'm not going to be able to take your question or your comment at this point. I'm going to have to turn it back over to Danielle and kind of let her close us out. I want to thank all of you. It was a pleasure to meet and to talk with all of you. I've learned a great deal. And I hope that I get the chance to interact with all of you sometime in the future. You are a really, not only intelligent, you're more than intelligent. You're a very wise group of folks. And that is what's most important in life, is wisdom. So thank you all for participating and giving me an opportunity to grow with you. Danielle, it's all yours.
Wise, brilliant, and wonderful WU students. You guys rock. Thank you very, very, very much for taking the time today. You guys were also thoughtful and helpful. We appreciate it. And I'm excited to have a chance to feel your spirit and hear from you and hear how you're doing right now. We want to continue this conversation. So don't feel bad that this is over. We will do this again. I'm constantly thinking, scheming, turning. Maybe we make it a weekly thing. Maybe we make it a monthly thing. Whatever we can do to keep this conversation doing, I promise I will do everything in my power to keep it going and not let it end. We may change the topic, we may change the format, but we'll keep it going. I can promise you that much. Thank you, Eugene, for always being there when I call and I scream. Thank you very much. I also want to give a very special thank you and shout out to Dr. Kelly Irby and Miss Graciela Berman and Dr. Muffy Walter and other members of the Washburn University Faculty Committee on Diversity and Inclusion. They are extremely helpful in helping me work with IT and get this going today. So I also want to really say thank you to Dale Rush, to Brenda White, Steve Haverty over at ITS, I challenged them this morning and early this week in order to get the technology we needed to get this going. I also need to say a final thank you to Dr. Eric Grospich. He's the Vice President for Student Life. He helps us provide funding and everything that we need to in student life to be supportive to students. So I know where you all are. I've got all of your contact information. This will not be the end. Please keep watch on the Washburn University website for notice of additional events and conversations this summer and fall. And for those of you who have questions or ideas, I would love to hear all of those. You can email us at diversity.inclusion@washburn.edu. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Bye-bye.